Nintendo just released their quarterly financial report, and among all of the juicy data, we learned that, now that we have a better idea of how the Switch 2 sold through the rest of 2025, we see that it is now definitely the fastest selling video game console of all time. No doubt about it. That's very cool. But then to go along with that, a nice little pairing record, like a nice cheese with a fine wine, we also learned that the Nintendo Switch is now officially Nintendo's best-selling console of all time. It finally happened. I mean, and we knew it was going to happen. It's been coming for a while. It's been creeping up and up and up to that DS number for a good while now. And sales have slowed down, obviously, but like it was gonna beat the DS, and it was only a matter of time. And it finally did. In the top 5, you have the Game Boy Advance at 81.5 million, which is crazy. It even beat the 3DS, which is really funny because the GBA had like 4 years on the market as their dedicated handheld. So that's really, really wild. And then the Wii at 101, Game Boy at 118 million, and then the DS was at 154, and the Switch has scraped by at 155.37 million. And I mean, that's pretty good. It means that it is selling, even if it has slowed down a good bit. If the last time they did a quarterly report, I don't remember exactly where the Switch was, but if it is now a good 1.3 million or so over the DS, it means that it does have some momentum. But yeah, first let's just focus on the milestone part. I mean, I really think it's great. I really think the Switch maybe was an inevitability. Like, technologically speaking, Nintendo always had their home consoles and their handhelds. I suppose it was inevitable that we would reach a point when they could combine those into one system. But it's been fun just seeing how well that's worked out for them. You know, because, like, in theory, okay, well, you can't, like, assume that adding the two together is gonna, like, really add the two together, you know? If your average home console sells this much and your handheld sells this much, you're not gonna, like, necessarily just add the two numbers together. And yet it has been very close to that. You know, it's been at least pretty close. And obviously, like, it comes down to the system itself, the form factor, the fact that it's a handheld or home console. Like, that's just, it's just so perfect. And then that really just lined up with Nintendo putting out a bunch of games that people really, really, really wanted to play. You know, just like some really, really big hits, very, very large games between like Zelda and just Smash and Mario. And just they've done really, really well. And that has had just an amazing impact on their business. 155 million, like it is a lot. Nintendo combined their home console and a handheld, and the very first attempt to do so, the very first system where they began this new era, which they will probably do forever. I see no reason to believe why it's not going to just be this way forever, at least to some degree. And the first time they did, the very beginning of the Switch lineage, it just skyrocketed them to success. It's now the #1 best-selling Nintendo console ever. I think it may not ever be beaten. I don't know. I still feel like there was probably like the whole, you know, cultural phenomenon hype element. I think it's at least possible that we'll see lesser numbers than that going forward. Not a lot, you know. If they just keep putting out Switches, there's every reason to believe they'll all be successful to a degree. Will they ever reach the success of the original Switch? Maybe. Because you know what, that's the thing. You know, look at something like Pokemon. It started out and it was this big, humongous thing. But then, like, it made fans who stayed fans. And so now just more human beings get born into the world and become Pokemon fans. Like, more get created than get uncreated. So, like, it's technically possible that we could still just see growth for Nintendo and the Switch platform over the years. Even if the Switch 2 does end up being something of a decline from the Switch 1, maybe the Switch 3 will be even better. Like, I really don't know. You don't know, like, what's going to happen to the video game playing populace. But yeah, we have to. Like, this discussion always comes to the question of whether or not we can expect the Switch to become the top-selling video game console of all time, period. Because, as we all know, the PS2 was sitting around 150, 155, and then the old president of Sony just pulled an extra 5 million out of nowhere and was like, well, it's actually more like 160. And we're like taking that as gospel is the thing. It's like, we haven't even, I don't even think that's an official number. And yet we are like, okay, that must be true. Let's assume that that's true. It means that the Switch would need to sell another like 5 million to be like absolutely, definitely the winner. But it's like, it's still just so not a sure thing. It's definitely possible. Again, if it's still selling, you know, by the smaller millions or even hundreds of thousands, then it could. It absolutely could. But like, now you have the Switch 2. There's less reason than ever to buy the original Switch. Nintendo actually raised the price of the original Switch, and we've gone through the whole discussion a million times. If Nintendo wanted it to be the best-selling console ever, they could do it easily. They would just start discounting it. They would advertise the Switch as their budget system. Oh, you can't get a Switch 2 yet, or you don't want a Switch 2 yet? That's fine. Look, we have the Switch, and we've got a million billion games for it, so, and now there's a cheaper version, you know, it's like the 2DS or whatever. They could do that, but like reaching that milestone is not necessarily important to them, and right now, I think they've raised the price of the original Switch. They're doing everything they can to not have to raise the price of the Switch 2, so they're trying to like make up a little bit of extra money in other areas, and so that's why they raised the price of the original Switch, not Switch 2. And I think that's probably going to be the case moving forward. And if that's the case, then yeah, it's just like the original Switch is less and less of a good value proposition all the time. So we don't know what could happen to sales of the Switch as the Switch 2 gets rolling. Even these numbers here, they're still okay. It's still got legs. You just never know what's going to happen to them. They could slow down to a point where there's essentially no chance at all that they could move another 5 million units of Switch. You know, even if they're still selling like 100,000 of the things per month, well then that's only like 1.2 million in a year. And every single year that the Switch 2 gets its legs, gets its footing, sinks in its roots, becomes the thing, then yeah, we're just gonna see those Switch sales drop off. So we don't know. As a fan, it would be fun to see the original Switch become the best-selling console of all time. I'm less and less convinced all the time that that's gonna happen, but this last bump to push it up above the DS is okay. That's a pretty okay bump. So, I don't know. I guess we'll see. In the meantime, though, best-selling Nintendo console of all time is still pretty darn good. Still pretty darn good. You know, you look at the Wii and the DS, and they were seen as these just incredible crazy successes. So, like, if you can pass either of those, like, you're already doing pretty okay. Especially if you look at how, like, the Wii was like 100 million, and then the DS was like 150. It's a handheld. It's cheaper. People are more likely to buy multiple of them, and they're more likely to, like, break or whatever. And it's just like, it's more of a budget-friendly thing. So, like, the Switch beat even that, even the DS, which got all of these different models, and a lot of them were, like, really, really affordable. That was back when it was possible to purchase a video game playing piece of hardware for a price that you went like, you know, that's not bad. Back when that was a thing. The Switch still beat it. Still beat it. Pretty cool.